Hello and welcome to our Black History Month interview series here at SRS and Heritage, brought to you by Beams, our Black Employee Resource Group here. My name is Percy Freeman, and today I have with me SRS-sponsored golfer Cameron Champ. Cameron, can you give us a little of your story here?
Yeah, well, obviously I am biracial. I think a lot of people, when they first look at me, they would have no idea, but I come from a biracial background. Grew up in North Highlands, Foothill Farms area of California. That's kind of obviously where I, became or was introduced to the game of golf. That's where I kind of learned to love it through my grandfather on my dad's side. He served the military. He was from Columbus, Texas. Back in those days, obviously, racism at that time in the 50s and 60s in Texas was probably at its peak. So for him, it was the best thing to do is go into the military. As I got older, kind of found out Pops was kind of the one of the fighters in the family. So I think the best thing for him at that time was to go into the service. And my dad was born in Europe. And when he got stationed back in the States, couldn't come back to Texas because my grandmother was obviously white and she was yearning back to the States with her. So that's how we ended up in Sacramento, California. And from there, it has brought me back to Texas, only about 40 minutes from where my grandfather grew up.
So a lot more to your history than I guess meets the eye, as you would say.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that history kind of plays a part in kind of who you are today and kind of how you approach playing the game?
I think so, definitely. Like I said, I've as a kid, where I grew up in, it was never really, it wasn't the bad area. Where my grandfather lived was pretty rough. All that used to be old military homes, and then it turned into Section 8. So, for me as a kid, I've been exposed to pretty much everything, and I've been able to witness things and experience things myself and kind of learn to develop, on my own. Obviously, my parents were kind of strict on me to a certain degree, but they wanted me to learn it myself and to make mistakes. I mean, we have to make mistakes to learn. So if we don't make mistakes, then we don't learn those lessons. I think just over time, it's kind of created me as a person, and obviously me as a man now, being 26 and having my own responsibilities and kind of my own life and my own family that I have to look after. So my early 20s, when my grandfather was getting to that age, all of his brothers were around that age, taking that wisdom from them, taking their experiences, learning from them, and just adapting. So and like I said, it's ironic that I ended up going to school in Texas A&M, which again, one of the stories is my grandfather was traveling from I think from up towards Dallas down back to Houston, transferring bases. He was flying out to go overseas, and they stopped in College Station probably early 60s, and they stopped to get some food, and at that time he wasn't allowed in the restaurants, and I ended up going to school there. So it's amazing how things have changed from back then to where it is now. Yes, there's a lot more work to be done, but as far as what you've seen from the 50s, 60s, and 70s to where we are now, it's definitely a dramatic change from then. But I still think anybody who's biracial or just a minority in general knows there's a lot more work to be done.
Absolutely. So, in knowing your grandfather's history, and it sounds like he played a very, very important role in just your life in general. When you think about some of the things that you've done, I saw you have a scholarship that you created. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so throughout when I first turned pro, we started the Cameron Champ Foundation just to get things going and to have something that we created ourselves at home and for our own personal community. And from there, we can grow it, into something else. And back in the day, my grandfather wanted to go to Prairie View, but at that time, again, they couldn't afford it. For one, two, it was still the best thing for him to go to the Air Force. So for us, again, I'm literally probably 10, 15 minutes from Prairie View. And again, it's given the next generation of kids just an opportunity to succeed. Yes, we're using the game of golf, and that's kind of the same way our foundation is set up. But again, that's not the overall outlook of it. I was given a chance because when I was 15 to obviously pursue my golf career, because that was what I wanted to do. And I got an opportunity and I took advantage of it. But again, these kids, some of them want to do golf, some of them want to be lawyers or want to be whatever it may be. It still gives them, those resources through the game of golf to help them in the long run. So I think for us, that was the main key with helping with that. Again, it's I've been given so much as a kid. Even now, I'm still being given and being helped and being guided. So you're never too old to learn and to want to be even more successful than where you are now. So I just think that's just the overall outlook right now. And again, helping as many kids, for instance, like myself, who grew up in those areas and who had very minimal resources, who get that opportunity. I probably would have went to local JC, and who knows what would have happened. I mean, I have no idea, because I knew my parents couldn't afford college. They couldn't afford any of that, let alone barely even afford to go to a JC. So it's just like you said, giving them those opportunities and resources.
Absolutely. So, as you think about like your foundation and just some of the work that you're doing in the community, and yeah, I feel like that all kind of plays a part into the legacy that you leave behind. When you think about just Cameron Champ, as a whole, like what's the legacy that you hope to leave behind? What's the story you want told about you?
To me, I never really think anything about me. I mean, I as my wife will say, I mean, even my family or close friends, I'm not. I hate when it's all about me. I've never been that way. Like, I'm not a spotlight person. I don't like. That's why we live out in the country with 30 acres, and we just like being secluded and kind of having our own space. So for me, I just think it's the same way that my wife knows of how I would want to leave my legacy in general. Being a great husband, being a great son, a great father one day, a great friend. Remembering me for those things, and the same thing goes with my foundation. It's more so being remembered for doing the right thing, and everything else after that is what it is. If I win 10 more golf tournaments, if I win a major, or if I win this or that, I mean, that's all great and all, but in reality, it's whoever's sitting next to you whenever your day comes to go up to heaven. I mean, that's really what's important. So, and again, that's what those people are going to remember you for, not for, oh, I won this golf tournament this year, and oh, I hit this shot at this time and won the tournament. Like, that's all dandy, and I love that, but it's, again, there's a more broader outlook on things. And as I've been out on tour, I've slowly started to develop that and see that's what I love to do, and that's what's fun. But that's, in the overall scheme of things, it's, for me, it's not the overall reality of who I am, if that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. It's life's much bigger than any
Yeah.
one thing. It's about like, who do you help, who do you love, and how
Yep.
great you are in those aspects. So when
Yep.
you
Yep.
think about kind of helping and giving back and so forth, question I always think about is how do you see mentorship, and the importance of having a mentor?
I think it's huge. Obviously, my mentor was my grandfather until he passed. So I had him for 23 years. And even I had obviously other people as well. Now, even again, as an adult and being on my own, I have other mentors as well that's guiding me, whether it be family stuff or business stuff, or learning things that I would have never learned back then, now that I need to have, in order to be successful, or just to, make a good living, or, whatever it may be, to be a better husband. There's always certain people in your life that come in and that can help you in so many ways, but you just have to ask the questions. I think nowadays people are, too scared or too embarrassed to ask for help. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. Nobody's never successful without asking for help. The majority of the ones that don't ask for help aren't successful. So for me, that's I think that's something I just had to get over, and once I did, it changed a lot of things for me. So it's never a bad thing to be vulnerable, because again, that allows you, well, at that point, that you've made some mistakes, but again, you're never going to learn unless you make mistakes. It's just about pushing forward, overcoming those mistakes and just becoming better.
I couldn't agree more. So before we dive into just a couple Black History Month questions, I want to ask you just a last personal or career question. Is there a moment or a competition game otherwise that has, you feel like, shaped your career more than anything else?
I would think Safeway when I won in Napa, just because of the circumstances. I didn't know. I knew my grandpa was sick, but I didn't know of the extent of it. My parents kind of hid it, and so I flew in. I played Sanders the week before, and I think they wanted to tell me in person because it declined very quickly, within a week. So I think that week, I really had no ambition to play. I could really care less, but he wanted me to play. And my Uncle Glado came in from Columbus, one of his older brothers, and stayed for a month until he passed. But he was there, and so he wanted to watch me play. So I was like, okay, you know what? I'll go play, and I'm going to see what I can do. And that week I think I made one bogey all week. I played flawless. Obviously coming down the stretch, I made a bogey on 17, missed a little 4-footer. Knew I had to birdie 18, and did it relatively easy. I think when you look at it, on the recorder, but I think to win in those circumstances and knowing what it meant to me, I think at that time, to me, it's very powerful because I just think for one, it's hard to win on tour alone. Two, again, with those circumstances and everything I knew, I had my entire family was there. Everybody from Sacramento that was close to me was there. So I think for me, that was just a special moment for me that I think will be at the top of my golfing career for the rest of my life.
That's a powerful moment, and so I can
Yeah.
totally understand that being peak moment for
Yeah.
you there. So the next thing,
Yeah.
I'll dive into Black History questions for you here. So
Yep.
tell me, why do you see it being important that we celebrate Black History?
To me, Black History should be celebrated every day. It's funny how, like you said, how things have transpired. Over the years, they created a month, but in reality, it's every day. So what does that mean? The other months we celebrate everybody else. So, like you said, things go in the right direction, but I also feel like, again, it's a step for everybody to see the true, honest history, to see the ones that have come up and sacrificed as much as they have in order for us to be in the position we are now. So for my grandfather, for my dad, and obviously for me to be in the position I am now. So, there's a lot of stuff, that goes unseen and that goes unappreciated, that this is an opportunity for us to say thank you and to talk about those people that don't get talked about enough. And that's why I said, it's only a month, but in reality, it's every single day.
Absolutely. So when you think about Black history as a whole and the recognizing Black history, how do you see us moving forward? Getting closer to the celebration of it being, I guess, American history. How can the community recognize?
That can go many ways, but personally, I think it's a topic that, again, I think makes a lot of people uncomfortable. A couple years back when Mr. Floyd's incident happened, I remember when I started speaking about it, and Mr. Blake, and when all the videos came out, again, it showed me a lot just because of how uncomfortable it made people. Because again, we're in a society now where everything is on video, so you're able to actually see what happens versus back then you couldn't. And laws were made back then because of that, because they knew they can get away with it. So I just think now it's creating more dialogue and more talking and, getting, I wouldn't say belief, but just more of a better understanding of what a person of color or a minority goes through, in order to even be somewhat successful, especially if we're coming from those neighborhoods. Like Schoolboy Q is a prime example. I've gotten to know him well. He's a good dude. He did something when he was 17 years old that he's still paying for today, 20 years later. He's gotten himself from an area that you basically had 0% chance of making it, and he's doing something that he could never have even dreamed of. And he's doing things to help others. He's a great father. He's a great friend. He's a down-to-earth dude. he's just because he's from that area and just because, he talks that certain way or kind of acts that certain way. Again, it's more of a cultural thing where, again, majority of Americans just find it uncomfortable because they've never been to those areas or they've never had conversations or dialogues with people like him. And again, that's obviously where I'm comfortable because I kind of grew up in that era, and I know, you just kind of know, I don't know the word I'm trying to use, but it's a comfortability factor, I think, is the main thing. And once that comfortability is there, yeah, it's just there's no difference. Just because he may talk different or he may have a little swagger to him, and just because he's in the music industry doesn't mean he's a bad dude. Like it's just this perception that's still there today, which then again makes people uncomfortable to talk about, and it puts them in situations that, again, once the uncomfortability is there, then the dialogue just goes away and it just tries to get washed away. And then we have to restart all over again. I think that's the main key is, again, having that dialogue keep going and conversations keep going, because that's going to be the only way for things to, again, increase and get better even more.
I couldn't agree more. We have to do a better job of communicating with each other and
Yep.
just treating
Yep.
people as people. When you
Yep.
think about yourself, personally, and your history with your grandfather, your upbringing, playing the game of golf, just in general, is there any historical Black figure that you identify with, or that is kind of your inspiration in a way, or for lack of better words?
In the game of golf.
Just in general. No, it doesn't have to be golf, just in general. Historical Black figure that means something to you.
I'll go back to my grandfather every single time on that. I mean, I know a lot of people would probably say, especially in the golf world, Tiger, or, you can go Calvin Peete, Charlie Sifford. I mean, all the old legends that came up in the game. But for me, I think it's more than just the game. It's more of the overall outlook of who you'd want to be as a person. So that's why for me, when I say my grandfather, he was everything for me. That's why he was my hero. And people have asked me, well, your dad's not your hero, and I go, well, my grandfather was my dad's hero too. So I go, it's not that my dad's not my hero. It's just we both went for him for advice because he was just that amazing of a man. So I think for me, he's definitely the person for me. I think, again, just the overall outlook. He didn't care what I shot. If I told him I shot 80, he's like, okay, well, go play ball tomorrow. Who cares? It was never anything negativity, or it was always something positive. And whether it be something at home or something when I was in school and when I was in college or high school, he was always so positive and looking more about what's next, what's in front of you, behind you. You can't do anything about that. So I think for me, with my life, and same thing with golf, that's the mind frame you have to have, in order to improve and in order to have success. Because, if you dwell on things in the past, it can just cause a lot of issues. And again, that's something I'm still learning. Again, I'm still young. I'm 26. I'm still learning that with the golf world. I'm still learning that at home. I'm still learning that with my friends, business world. I mean, it's intertwined with anything we do. But I think definitely him over anybody by far.
Sounds like an amazing man, and I will say at 26, you've become an amazing young man yourself, and I think you've accomplished a lot in these 26 years. So I'd say keep up the great work.
Much more to come.
Absolutely. So last question here, and this one's kind of an open-ended. Anything that you'd like to leave the Beams Employee Resource Group with, or any bit of advice? Or
for me, I mean, it's the most cliche thing ever, but I mean, just treat people how you want to be treated. I mean, right? I mean, it's
easy that way.
it's pretty, yeah. I mean, if everybody did that, it'd be a less confrontational world. So no matter how much money you make, what color your skin is, what kind of car you drive, where you live, it'd just be like you said, just a much more peaceful world. And again, for me, that's kind of always how I've been. I always treat everybody the same, regardless again of all those characteristics. So, just be yourself, be happy, look out for the person behind you. For me, I've always done more for others than myself. And that's just kind of how I am. That's how I've been built. And I'll always continue to do that, because that's what makes me happy. And it's not so much, again, for the satisfaction of getting, or helping that person. It's just because that's just what I like doing. I like helping others, whether they're in need or even if they're not in need. If they, whoever it may be or organization needs my help, I'm totally in for it, and will always give my time for that.
And I will definitely say, on behalf of Beams and behalf of SRS, thank you, Cameron. Really, really appreciate the time, and it's been a pleasure.
Yes. No, thank y'all, and I appreciate it always.